Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second annual Navigating Differences Symposium. I'm Charlie Arms, the Executive Director of Brennan Sailing. Just a quick overview. I think most everyone came up in the elevator. Just next to the elevator is the stairs. So if you have to evacuate for any reason, we'll go down the stairs. Just on the other side of the elevator at both ends are the restrooms. So if you need to use those. And there's water out here. There's also a water refilling station by the restrooms. We're all thrilled to have you guys here. This is something I'll talk a little bit about in my presentation, why we are having the symposium and what we hope to accomplish at it. But I'd first like to introduce Dr. Derek Cockburn, our host here at American University. He is the director of the Institute for Disability and Public Policy, which is the reason we're here. Their office is just down the hall. So Dr. Cockburn.
Thank you.
Oh, and be sure to silence your cell phones, please.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It is a pleasure to be here. I am happy to serve as our founding executive director of our Institute on Disability and Public Policy. I'm also a full professor with a joint appointment here at the university in the AU School of International Service and the Kogod School of Business. So on behalf of American University and IDPP, I would like to welcome you to this second Navigating Differences Symposium here in our historic Spring Valley building. So this building is the current home to numerous AU units, including the AU School of Education, the School of Public Policy has a key executive leadership program who we're sharing the space with today. They're next door. They also have several programs from the Kogod School of Business that's here. And it's the home of our Institute on Disability and Public Policy, as Charlie said. This building also serves historically as our law school. So the Washington College of Law, which was lauded as one of the most diverse colleges of law in the country. And so I love being in this building for various reasons. And I also want to acknowledge my deputy director, Filippo Trevisan, who is going to be with us, who is traveling in Europe on family business. So the first Navigating Differences Symposium was organized by Brennan Sailing last year at St. Mary's University in Southern Maryland. And I had the honor of speaking, and I had the honor of serving as a board member of Brennan Sailing. Bless you, salute. And I was delighted to speak at that inaugural symposium. So I found it to be an exhilarating experience, as I hope you do today, full of information about how to support persons with learning differences, particularly youth. And I'm equally excited to help American University serve as co-host of this second Navigating Differences Symposium. I wear many hats here at the university. So first and foremost, I'm a professor, and I have appointments in information technology and analytics, in Kogod, and in environment development and health in the School of International Service. And faculty responsibilities are multifaceted. We get a chance to do research, teaching, and service, and we get to bring all three of those together. So these kinds of activities let us do all of that, bringing those three pieces together. IDPP was founded here in 2010 with support from the Nippon Foundation, and we focused initially on information and communications technologies in Southeast Asia and creating an opportunity for persons with learning differences and physical disabilities in Southeast Asia to get master's degrees. We launched American University's first fully online master's degree in comparative and international disability policy. And in 2017, we turned over that program to our colleagues in Southeast Asia, leaving them with a network of 20 universities and 14 alumni from our master's program. 2017 also played a critical role for inclusion here at American University. As we turned over that program, American University also welcomed its new president, Sylvia Burwell. She was elected as the 15th president of American University and the first woman to ever hold that role. And I was honored to be selected by the president to serve on her strategic planning council. And at the end of that, we came up with a strategic plan for the university focused on inclusive excellence. So the plan for inclusive excellence begins with these words: learning for and leading toward an equitable world. American University was founded to respond to the needs of a changing world with a set of guiding values, among them diversity, equity, and inclusion. AU cannot be excellent without being truly inclusive and without taking the concrete, specific steps to improve our campus climate. So that inclusive excellence strategy helped to fuel numerous partnerships and initiatives on campus, including our strategic research initiative on inclusive technology and policy, which IDPP helps to lead, along with our Internet Governance Lab, the Washington College of Law, School of Public Policy. And the inaugural recipient of that award was our distinguished alumna from the School of International Service, Doreen Bogdan Martin. Doreen graduated from the School of International Service and was recently elected as the Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union in Geneva, the first woman to hold that role as well. So these efforts have focused on creating opportunities for us here on campus to think about inclusion and participation, and to think about strategically, how do we make that a reality here on campus? We are now in a process here on campus with our provost stepping down and our president announcing that this will be her last year as well, to try to continue these strategic initiatives around inclusion and participation. So this symposium, focused on navigating differences, helps to point us in that direction. So we encourage inclusion here on campus. We want to make sure that we do so to support all faculty, staff, and students with learning differences and other needs here on campus. We have an academic support and access center that does that for students and make sure that students get the kind of accommodations that they need here on campus. So that kind of institutional support is critical to that process. So welcome, once again, I want to welcome everyone here to American University, to this historic Spring Valley building. And I look forward to spending this day with you. This afternoon, I'll share more of my ideas with you. And I want to thank Executive Director Charlie Arms, President Joanne Dorval, Chairman Muldoon, and the rest of the Brennan Sailing organization for partnering with us on this important second Navigating Differences Symposium. So thank you.
All right, thanks. So we're going to just get kicked off right away. Our first speaker is Kate McElderry, a program director for outreach at the Odyssey School and also an author. So Kate.
Thank you. So, thanks so much for having me. And it is funny talking about my name, because I was actually born Catherine McElderry, but Kate McElderry is how it is pronounced in Baltimore County, Maryland. So that's what it is. And it's fine. But sometimes I do some work in Ireland, and it's good fun to actually hear it both ways and be reminded of just the flexibility of language, right? So anyway, I'm going to be talking about the power of yet, navigating neurodiversity and tapping into brain plasticity and embracing a growth mindset. So I have to tell you that it feels very appropriate to be speaking at a symposium that is about navigating learning differences, Brendan Sailing, because I work at a school that is called the Odyssey School, and we are literally all about the boat names and the idea of navigating one's own personal journey. In fact, the students at our 8th grade level do actually read an abridged version, or sometimes the real thing of the Odyssey, depending on the reading level, but it's definitely a real theme for us. So I have 2 roles at the Odyssey School. I'm a language tutor for students who have dyslexia and other language-based learning differences, and I'm also the director of outreach. I'm trained in the science of reading. I have, in my past life, done some teaching at UNBC's education department when I was doing my own graduate work. I've been doing international trainings and workshops for teachers and students on and off throughout my career. I started out doing that long ago as a Peace Corps volunteer, and now that my children are in school and I have a little more flexibility, I'm starting to do some of those kinds of trainings again, and had a great pleasure of being in Kenya in June last summer, working at the Rare Gem Talent School, which is the only dyslexia neurodiverse focused school in all of Kenya. And they're doing great things with what they have, and it's really impressive, their holistic approach. And I also had the pleasure of participating in the Mount Kenya University Symposium, which is also dedicated to the same kind of themes we're talking about today. So it's great. I've also had the pleasure of speaking recently at the World Literacy Summit, at Oxford University, and just found it so interesting that, the things that we're going to be talking about today are, these are global issues. They're not just in our own patch. And I found that just very interesting and humbling, and good perspective to keep in mind. I'm also, as of September 30th, an official published author, and the book is been written with my colleague Mark Stoddart, who is a neurodiversity ambassador in the UK, and also a famous sculptor who has dyslexia and other neurodiverse profiles that like dysgraphia and ADHD, etc. So we wrote the book Making a Mark, Discovering the Power of Neurodiversity on a Learning Safari. And that was a big task, to be honest, because my real job is being a teacher. But I felt absolutely compelled to do it, and I will be touching on it a little bit because I hope that you might find interest in getting the book and reading it, because it's meant to be an educational resource. So as far as Odyssey, though, just a little bit more about it. It's a K-8 school, and it's for children with dyslexia and language-based learning differences. We offer an educational program using evidence-based methods, small group instruction, and daily tutoring for individual skill building. We really believe in character education and infuse this throughout our entire curriculum, in and outside of the classroom walls. And they're kindness, honesty, respect, and hard work. We call them our 4 pillars. We also recognize that school is a compelling part of a child's life. At Odyssey, we appreciate the value of each child and their individual journey. Saying that somebody has ADHD, dyslexia, or whatever doesn't mean it's the same journey somebody else has had and the same profile. We recognize that. There's incredible nuance. So it helps that we're a small and nurturing community rooted in evidence-based practices, because we can really help meet those individual needs and profiles. We believe in building off existing strengths and celebrating them and helping develop interests and passions. And in our 30th year now, it's really exciting to have some of the alum come back and see that some of those passions developed at Odyssey are now their careers. Odyssey's academic program is tailored to each individual student with specific goals in mind. And one of the ways we achieve that is our signature tutoring program. Every single child has an hour of tutoring every single day. That's one-on-one or two-on-one, and it is a game changer. I'm, as I said, in the language tutoring department. So we work on reading and writing skills, but also executive functioning skills. And we are able to essentially develop in tutoring a curriculum for that child. So it's pretty powerful, and so powerful that I felt that it's really important that I want us to spread what we do beyond our school, since so many kids can't go to Odyssey. And I think that we have a lot to share. And as I said too, I've been involved and am involved in quite a bit of international work. So in any case, I've gotten increasingly involved with our outreach. So we're a hub we're a school, but we're also this outreach hub. And we have done early literacy, language and literacy screenings for many years. And we had to take a little pause during the pandemic, but are back at it again. And those are for 4- and 8-year-old children. We have school and community partnerships and internships for area college students. We've also, though, have now a partnership with University of Connecticut in their Transcend Neurodiverse PhD program. So we're also spreading out, again, not just in our region. I'm just going to do a little announcement. If you don't mind traveling to our campus, this is an amazing opportunity. Dr. Nadine Gabb is an incredible speaker, highly knowledgeable about dyslexia, the neurobiology of reading, learning differences, and proactive intervention. She'll be speaking at the Odyssey School for a free outreach event that I'm planning, and I would love if you could come. So the threads of what I'm going to be getting at this morning, and I could get so in depth, I'm going to really just touch on things, and feel free to also just give me a little time, if I'm starting to kind of go over, are the big picture of brain basics, neurodiversity and common LDs, learning differences, brain plasticity, and promoting a growth mindset, also known as, in my world, in my classroom, the power of yet, the idea that we're not there yet, but we can get there. Our brains are wired for pattern recognition, creating community, connection, and storytelling. And for that reason, I wanted to share very briefly a few stories of neurodiversity that also involve adversity, since the idea, I think, of navigating choppy waters is kind of part of what we're going to be talking about today. So the first story is about dyscalculia and anxiety. So dyscalculia refers to math learning difference. A long time ago, there was a girl who described math learning as crippling. While she had no trouble understanding quantities with counters and manipulatives, her brain did not naturally get numbers and symbols. And while algorithms themselves eventually made sense, she couldn't get calculations to come out accurately much of the time. This caused her frustration and silent shame. Math took her 3 or 4 times longer than her peers, required tutoring and extra time. She would frequently state that she hated math and that math hated her. Indeed, despite getting okay grades in math, she would get stomach aches during math tests and blank out from stress. Yet by young adulthood, she overcame this anxiety and came to like and appreciate math, receiving high scores in classes. Moreover, she began to have a feeling for math, seeing it as part of the beauty of the world around her. What explains this? Get to that in a minute. Story 2, dyspraxia of speech. This is motor planning, difficulty pronouncing, in this case. Once upon a time, there was a toddler who struggled to articulate certain sounds. Some people assumed he was lazy. Some said his parents should withhold objects, food, etc., to force him to make these sounds since he could speak. His mother didn't think he was lazy and noticed that it was long vowels, sounds that took more motor planning to pronounce that he struggled with. One night, she noticed the toddler could make the long A, O, and U sounds perfectly right after brushing his teeth. She mentioned this to the speech language pathologist they were working with. 9 months later, the young child asked where his baby sister was and whether he should hang his coat in the vestibule or not. Notice those long vowels. How did this happen? Story 3, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and anxiety. Once upon a time, a 10-year-old child would cry and bang his head against the wall when reading time came. School was such a nightmare that his parents tried homeschooling. It was not a success. Despite his parents' efforts and support, the child could not read sight or high-frequency words like cat, dog, or even the, and, or was. He compares himself to others. It seemed unfair and crazy that testing said he was exceptionally bright, yet couldn't read or write. Indeed, his pencil grip was awkward and his hand tired easily, trying to write his own name. Then, within 2 years, he was not only reading at grade level, but above grade level, also developing strong writing and typing skills. How did this happen? Executive functioning ADHD. Not so long ago, a very bright teen came up with wonderful ideas for stories. She was highly creative and had a huge imagination. Every year, parents encouraged her to submit a story for the annual creative writing contest at school. The first year of high school, she worked on a story, but never finished it. The deadline passed, and she felt terrible about herself. The second year, she forgot to press submit. The third year, she felt too badly about herself to even try again. She didn't even know where to begin. Yet the fourth year, she actually finished a story and created artwork to go with it. She won the contest, but best of all, felt good about herself. How did she do it? Last story. Dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. A while back, there was a boy who struggled with reading, writing, and sometimes mathematical calculations too. His parents misunderstood him and labeled him as slow and stupid. His parents loved their son, but put stock into school. Teachers were the experts, right? The parents prepared for a life in which the boy would probably never measure up to much, and they assumed and planned life accordingly. Despite the lack of faith in the boy's abilities, the boy learned the basics of reading, writing, and math once in school, a new school. Along the way, too, he discovered that he was excellent at applying math skills, had a natural business sense, had a good eye for noticing things others didn't, and was great with his hands, whether woodworking, gardening, or later sculpting. It turned out that he more than measured up and was very much proved the naysayers wrong. So how did this boy turned man go from zero confidence to living a life dedicated to building confidence in others? And this is my colleague, Mr. Mark Stoddard, who helped me write the book. So just a brief story analysis here. What are some common threads with these 5 short little neurodiverse stories? What do they have in common? So I'm just struggle, right? Anything else? Confidence, eventually. Lack of, and then they gained it. Anything else? Yeah.
Others underestimating the potential.
Oh, yes, thank you. Absolutely. And how sometimes too that without the right intervention, that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Okay, just had a training all about that yesterday. It was amazing. Just the statistics and how powerful it is of parents or teachers and what we, what bias we might have. Yes. Anxiety, absolutely. Very much threaded through. So the thing is, though, they also have success stories, all 5 of those stories. So there's struggle, but eventually do have confidence and success. And what explains that success? Brain plasticity does. Combined with a growth mindset, a belief that I can get better. And how did that happen? Through the individual's brain power, with well-matched instruction, positive intervention, support, the right kind of support, nuanced support. Remember, these different labels have very many different kinds of ways they manifest in the individual person. So one thing I want to note about this, and by the way, that first person was me, so I am neurodiverse, and I told you the last one is my co-author, Mark. That second person is one of my children, who not only can speak very well in English, took 8 years of Mandarin and Chinese, and knows Spanish very well, and I was told that he might never speak properly. So, we have to be really careful with experts. Not that I'm trying to bash anybody here, just to say, wow, right? Just talk about that potential, right? And also matching the right interventions. But the point is here, oh, and the other 2 people are students, former students. And they've all come to be very successful and have fulfilling lives. But these stories do not end as sort of happily ever after. This was an easy, quick fix, and these people are no longer neurodiverse. No, that's not what they are. They end these stories as really a beginning, a journey, in which they become happily ever after because they had the tools, support, and the environment in which to succeed. And these people continue to be neurodiverse, and we don't want them to not be neurodiverse because there are advantages to thinking differently. So all of this, again, is rooted in the brain. And I love to help, I think, dispel myths and delve into neurodiversity, cognitive learning differences more by really getting at the heart of this, and that's our brains. Our brains are incredible, and they're hugely unique. They're, we have so much power, and we have so much power to learn from others if we have a little more understanding of that uniqueness. So just a little quick 101 on it. I'm not a scientist, but I work with neuroscientists sometimes, and I love particularly collaborating with Dr. Fumiko Haift, who works at University of Connecticut and has done workshops for kids because she believes, and I believe too, if kids learn in a kid-friendly way about their brains, it's very empowering. And instead of feeling that they're flawed, to realize actually how powerful their brains are and what they can do. But anyway, it's this pinkish gray 3-pound organ, and it is the very source of what makes up humanity. Our root of thinking and intelligence, interpreter of his senses, initiator of bodily movements, controller of emotions, and it's just such a key, obviously, to success and well-being that I think it's important that kids learn about it because it empowers themselves and others. Some people liken the brain to the computer, the CEO of the human body, because it stores and processes information it takes in. And neuroscientist Fumiko Haift calls it the conductor of the body because it's an organ in charge of other organs that are working synchronously together. So when I was a kid, I'd often hear people talk about like whether you're right-brained or more like left-brained. And sometimes people still talk that way, but actually what neuroscientists are finding is that these 2 hemispheres are working very much together, and it isn't these sort of separate parts. And in fact, when I wrote the learning resource part of the book, there's some information on the table out there. The neuroscientists I all, consulted, they talked about, we say parts now in quotes because there's just so much kind of fluidity between these different organs, sometimes doing other things that we didn't realize they used to do. So it's incredibly complex, unique, and again, working in unison. The brain is influenced by the environment. It's incomplete and at birth. That's so important to realize. We're born just smart. We might be good at certain things that school expects of us, and we might not be, but that doesn't mean we can't get better. And we are purposely born with this incomplete brain, and so it's so important to realize we can grow those skills and also repurpose parts of the brain that are not naturally good at something to get better at something. So they're plastic, meaning they can change, and they're highly influenced by parents and teachers and the experiences that we have. So it's plastic, and that I think is really amazing to think about. That means it's flexible, shapeable, and able to grow, and that's a big wow. So what else do we know about it? It underlies learning, memory, and early childhood development. It's also how the brain revises its circuitry to help recover from injury or challenges. And, one of the goals that scientists have who study the brain is to better understand how to help people harness that plasticity, not just in children, but also as adults. We know that brains are most plastic in a child's youth, and also that, neuroplasticity does decrease as we get older, but the process of neurogenesis still exists throughout life with healthy habits. So it's 25 years of age is when brain architecture stops, but we can still be growing robust neural networks within that architecture our entire lives, very much depending on the choices we make and also our mindset. So neuroscience, a little perspective, I think here helps us appreciate the enormous power we have in shaping and influencing our minds. So I like to step back and look at the levels of neuroscience, and I love the way Dr. David Eagleman from Stanford University kind of maps this out with the scales of looking at neuroscience, and does that so nicely here with this visual here. So we can look at it from the molecular level, a neural level, to neural networks, architecture, and then perception. I do a workshop on this at Odyssey that goes really deep into this. I'm doing this super quick, just touching on it just to give us a little framework today. So molecules. The amygdala is this little organ tucked deeply inside the brain, and it's center for not only emotions, but behavior and memory. And it's called the amygdala because it's the shape, it's Latin actually, that means almond. And it's the shape of an almond. And it's amazing that this little organ is so little and yet so powerful, because we know that actually learning is emotional stuff, right? So we really need to understand more about the limbic system. I think teachers should be actually trained in this, right? To understand the power of what we do and how we say, and is going to influence whether a kid is even receptive to learning. So it can be triggered to send signals about what we're feeling or experience, whether we're frightened, we're ready to flee, comfortable, or primed to learn. So the brain processes these emotions, sending signals to the endocrine system, and it sends out hormones. So we have dopamine and oxytocin, which are prime the brain for learning, or we can have cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so my point here really is that we may not mean to. We may have good intentions, but unwittingly sometimes to be bathing students in a bath of cortisol and stress them out by not giving them strategies to match their learning profiles. And I feel a perfect example of this is when the accommodation for kids is extra time on tests. Well, if the kid doesn't have the strategies, what does extra time do? Extra time is more time to sit there fretting about the fact they don't know how to do what's on the test. And so you really are creating a situation of that, even though it's well-meaning. Extra time is only helpful if you know what to do. So this is a little video that you can look at on your own time if you want, but it's fun. This teacher in North Carolina just so gets the power of dopamine and oxytocin and what a winning combination this is in a classroom. He gets it. He fist bumps and does a little dance and acknowledges every single student as they come into his classroom. The dopamine is pleasure, motivation, engagement, making learning stick, okay, for long-term memory. And then oxytocin, he clearly gets that you need to build a warm classroom culture with trust and buy-in. So I think it's important for us to sort of think about that molecular level, just how powerful it is. The little things we're doing, body language and words we use and eye contact and the vibe, you know, that can actually prime or shut down learning. And people in the past used to say, oh, you know, we know that it inhibits or it diminishes. No, it actually can cause actual shutdown. So now we're talking about neurons, these electrically charged excitable cells that connect and communicate with others. Neurons at junctions, and it can be pronounced synapse or synapse. I'm married to a Brit, and he's always like synapse. And so anyway, either one. Anyway, the brain is packed with neurons, and I love to share with kids. You know, the wrinkling, that so is some sort of signature look of the brain is that way for a reason, and it's actually to pack in so many neurons. You know, like let them know your brain's packed with all these cells, these excitable cells. And the fact also is it's shaped that way, designed that way for efficient information transfer. So again, I'm going a little fast on this because I'm just trying to give the framework. But the point here now is that we are learning about, and hopefully maybe teaching our kids about the fact that we can build our brains and we can get better at things. A little perspective here too, from David Eagleman again. The human brain is the most complicated device on the universe. It has billions of neurons that make it up with many connections, synapses. So neuroscientists often talk about neurons firing together to wire together, and that's what we're talking about with making synaptic connections. So messages are sent between neurons across synapse using a sort of chemical or electrical bridge. And different types of synaptic reactions happen over different time scales. That's really important to think about because some of these processes are long and they underpin learning and memory, and some are happening within milliseconds. And if it's taking a very long time, that might be something to think about, how we're teaching something more efficiently or helping a kid get there so that connection is maybe made more quickly. And sometimes it's supposed to, but not always. Again, that's something for another workshop or talk. But now we're on to brain architecture. What's important to realize about this is that those early years are a great time for intervention. So while brain plasticity keeps on going a bit to the 25 years, well, our whole lives, sorry, but architectural development of the brain is at 25, and that caps off. Those early years we are so kind to help. At the same time, again, so important to realize we are growing our whole lives. It really isn't all over. So we can get better at things. That's something Dr. Nadine Gab gets at adults who come in and say, I can't read. Well, yes, you can, and we'll get there. Obviously, it's great if we can hit kids young, right? And before 10 years of age, before 8 really, but we can always improve. So interactions of genes and experience shape the developing brain, and the kinds of experiences we have, a positive fun day out sailing, for example, or maybe like this little child who struggling with sounds, but not when he puts the sounds as sound pictures on Matchbox cars and builds them together for segmenting and then blends them to make a word. That's fun. And that repeated experience too is going to be reinforced and help to build a strong neural network. So we're also, by the way, these pictures are showing an awareness of that molecular level, right? That we want dopamine and oxytocin. We want it to be fun. We want it to be positive. And we're still getting at what they need to do. And these children above really struggle to read, and they are now working through books and loving books and also associating them with a fun time, because after every book, we do something fun. They read the lemonade word and then they made a lemonade stand at school. So attaching a struggle with something pleasurable is very helpful. So circuits are reinforced by repeated use, and it does help if we can do it with something positive, and genes and experiences work together to construct brain architecture. Last part of this scale of perspective is to think about perception. The process by which nature and meaning of sensory stimuli are recognized and interpreted. And I love this, just, you know, which one is it? Is it 6 or 9? It kind of depends on where we stand, but also one point is like perception isn't always reality. And I think that that's a good place to sort of segue into thinking more about the neurodiversity piece here, right? Every single brain is different. A part of me kind of says, well, if in a way, if we all learn differently, do we even kind of need the labels, right? If you really get at kind of the nuanced level, at the same time, of course, they're very helpful. But the point is that with 100 billion neurons, we should expect brain diversity. And I hope that that's kind of a paradigm shifter for people to not think of ADHD and dyslexia, et cetera, as a deviation of a norm. It's not a deviation. It really isn't. We should expect this diversity, and it's always been there. And there's advantages to it in a person and in a society if we're inclusive. So neurodiversity refers to diversity in the human brain and cognition, mental processes, reading, writing, calculating, sociability, attention and mood. And it's a new sort of coined phrase that describes the idea of people experience and interact in the world around them in different ways, and that there's no right way of thinking, learning, behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. This sort of pathology paradigm that was so pervasive in the past, and definitely something I experienced as a kid. I was full of shame, and I had an imposter complex going on scholarship to a very academically rigorous school, thinking, oh my gosh, if they find out that I actually struggle, that I take 3 to 4 times longer, maybe they'll kick me out or something. And it's pretty powerful. Even if you're successful, it's amazing, the stigma. So neurodiversity is common. 1/5 of the world's population is not just something here in Maryland or Washington, D.C. or the U.S., right? And I want you to think again, it's not a deviation, because in gene pools, nature weeds out things that are not advantageous. Okay, so if 20% of a population is neurodiverse, including having cognitive learning differences, obviously there's advantages to it. And what's really interesting is that some MRIs really do show that people who have ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, etc., often have a very highly developed limbic system that really translate in terms of increased empathy and creativity, creative problem solving. So, you know, those two things are pretty huge and pretty important in a society. Do our schools support that is the question. So neurodiversity, 1/5 people are neurodiverse. Dyslexia is talked about the most, probably because we're such a print-oriented world, and there's so much more research on it. But lots of people have dyscalculia and these other learning differences I referred to. 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 people have dyslexia, and those estimates, they do range. There is a range because people measure it differently. There's different types of dyslexia, different degrees of it, and it can be there can be an interaction if somebody has another learning difference too. Oh, just also, sorry, the last thing, just to show you, these are some great books that kind of get at this spirit of the fact that there's advantages. So the problem isn't neurodiversity, it's learning differences, disabilities. And I'm not trying to diminish the challenge of disability, okay? It's just that it's a big part of it is the perception, the misunderstanding and mismatched teaching. That's the core of the problem. It's the bias about even what intelligence is that has led to stigma that is a problem. So one of those quotes that I have in the book about The Power of Different, Dr. Gail Saltz. She is a leading psychologist in, most expensive part of New York City. And she said, these are families that obviously have the money to get their kids tested. And it takes on average 5 years. They've had indications they probably should get their kid tested and interventions, and on average 5 years. And she said, why is that? Why do they wait so long? Because of stigma. They're so scared. They're so scared. Like, this is going to be my kid. Like, we're really saying they have something wrong. And why is that? It's because of, again, like what we're told, instead of the reality of actually worldwide, this is common. And it's supposed to be that way. And everybody has something to offer. So we don't want to change people from being neurodiverse. We want to help match the right methods and experiences, the right kind of education to help with challenging parts of the learning differences. Part of my neurodiverse profile is like, I'm kind of intense, I'm creative, I work at math a different way, I'm really visual, I need manipulatives. I get there. I'm not great with the mental math because my brain transposes numbers. So I can't trust that 13 is going to stay 13 and not become 31 somewhere along the line, okay? But I know that about myself. And I was helped with the challenging parts, and I kind of know where the hiccups are. And I'm also able to have the mindset, I actually think everybody has a challenge. And I'm not saying they're all equal. And again, I'm not here to diminish challenges, but I went from being that crippled, mentally crippled student to now excited about it. And I think it's a powerful to realize we don't want to take the neurodiversity out of people. So, but let's face it, not everyone gets neurodiversity, or we wouldn't be here. These are characters from the book. Mark and I decided we wanted to be fun and kid-friendly, so we decided to have it done in comics. And this is where I do my plug here. Sorry about the book, but Making a Mark, Discovering the Power of Neurodiversity on a Learning Safari. And it is aimed for children, really it's for all. I mean, the last 40 pages is a learning resource, and it is really, it's pretty heavy protein in learning about the brain and learning differences. But the story part is certainly appropriate as young as 7 years old. And just a little bit more about it. I told you about Mark. It's designed actually as a conversation. Characters have common LD profiles, and they continue talking throughout the story. The story part is like a normal story, and then it just keeps flowing right into the learning resource part where they're actually narrating it. So instead of us trying to act like we're experts where everybody has the same profile, we have the same characters talking about their profiles and strategies that were helpful, as well as information about learning differences themselves. So this is what I mean by that. Those characters then become older, and then they are reflecting about their experiences and teaching the reader about things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and dyspraxia. And it's done in a, like I said, a sort of teacher and kid-friendly way. It builds off of strengths, and it's all about bolstering challenges. It's aimed to normalize neurodiversity and also present intersectionality of diversity. So we wanted to infuse like someone who had maybe a physical disability. We also wanted to get the idea that, you're not just one thing. You can be an artist, and you can be a sailor. You can also have ADHD. You might also have, you can have lots of things, lots of ways we might identify ourselves. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a teacher, I'm an outreach director. I sometimes dabble in art myself. I'm a hiker. There's different ways. I'm not just somebody who struggles in math, and that's where it stops. So it was really important to Mark and I, when we did the book, that we wanted these little characters, the little comic people, to actually be multidimensional, and the teachers too. Not that this is a long book, and it's not a long novel, but just that we are making nods to show, look, people are complex. And also that when they become adults, they do different things. Success is, a really arbitrary, subjective term. It comes in many forms. and not everybody is out to be, the Richard Bransons, when they always talk, I feel like, about these, entrepreneur, successful dyslexics, that's fine, okay, but not everybody is destined to be that, and that's okay. And it's not like there's something less than by being something else and not making loads of money. So one of the aims is to rethink learning disability and to think it out as a difference that's a lot more normal than we've been treating it in the past in society and globally. And we're not diminishing the challenges, but again, trying to kind of rethink and reframe. Also model strategies and the growth mindset, the belief that we can bounce off of our brain plasticity to improve. So the neuroeducational strands include growth mindset and building resistance. Navigating learning differences in some then means understanding the brain, I would argue. Neurodiversity and dispelling myths about it. Employing strategies to harness plasticity through a growth mindset. So just in summing up here, one of the goals of modern neuroscience is to better understand brain complexity and uniqueness, help individuals take advantage of their unique profile and infuse new takeaways, and guide education and learning accordingly, we hope. Normalize neurodiversity because every journey of learning is truly unique to the individual. So it's just the idea of, again, the power of yet. We're not there yet, but I'll get there, the right support. Thank you so much.
That was super.
Thank you.
Really, really exciting. You know, every time we have conversations like this, it helps us think about ourselves and our own journeys and struggles and challenges. So I really, really appreciate it. What would you say is the appropriate balance between self-advocacy, maybe parent advocacy, and institutional preparation and change and structure and so forth? It seems like when you were first going through the success stories, there's kind of a balance between those people who know that they need to get some assistance and find the right supports and so forth, even though they're running into, you know, environments where there's challenges. And then some instances where the institution is really saying, we can identify you, we can help support you and so forth. How do you see that balance happening?
That's a good question. I think it's really going to depend, to be perfectly honest, right? Because in the case of a really young child, they're not going to know, right? And one of the things that's really interesting about that is, but often sometimes parents don't know, or even teachers are told this wait. It's basically, we have a wait to fail model. I hate to say it. We have a wait to fail model until second grade, and then the brain plasticity, we're starting to already lose ground because they're about 8 years old. I mean, I'm not really answering your question. I just feel that we need to educate. We need to be educating teachers so that they're able to identify. It shouldn't be up to parents.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be up to parents. I mean, it's an important role. It's a great role. And I'm a parent of an ADHD 16-year-old, right? I'm so glad that his school gets it. And they have been getting it. So they understood, like, you know, he just does well with us. Sometimes stand up a little bit, move around sometimes, then sit down. You know, some of it's basic stuff but yeah, I feel that it needs to come in education programs more, the university level, so our teachers are getting trained and they get it and they can recognize it, and also recognize when they don't know and it's okay to ask. And I'm standing up here like I know everything, okay? I'm on this growth mindset mode of like, I'm a lifelong learner and we just keep learning more. So let's not act like it's all done, you know, once we become a teacher or somebody with a master's or PhD or whatever. It's a really exciting field. I'm not really answering the question, but
super
yeah.
helpful. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
You mentioned that it's the role of the teachers and not really the parents, and yet there are teachers who are recommending that a particular child be tested. And the parents resist it because of that stigma that you also mentioned.
Yes.
They don't want their kid to be labeled special ed. They don't want that kid to go out of class for resources. They don't want special programs, all the things that might help that child,
Right.
but they don't want their child labeled, so they say, no, we're not gonna do anything.
No, that's a good point, and I have encountered that. I don't so much in a school that's specialized and we're all kind of get it, so, but that's a great point. And definitely would be something Dr. Dale Saltz would say. But there's two thoughts with that. One is, yes, you can, I would say, yes, the parent does have a role here. I would say though, that again, if we as institutions though, were treating this differently, it wouldn't be so scary. It would just seem like, oh, and I need to get my kid glasses because they need them. And nobody would say, no, am I getting, I mean, some people might, but most people are not going to balk at that. And it's really not different if we treated it that way.
But how do we get from?
Well, we have a lot of work to do.
I'm gonna talk about that this afternoon.
Well, just to comment on that, and then I have a question. I think what you're getting at is we make it a very individualized issue for the moment. But this takes policy questions,
That's right.
so that not just the teachers, but the system isn't resistant, parents aren't resistant.
Right.
So it is, I mean, that's why these kinds of discussions are so important. And I'm looking forward to some of the others because it's about how we create an ecosystem around that versus
That's a great way to put it.
just dealing with this
Absolutely.
child, my child, that child.
Acting as though it's something unusual. I mean, that's why I keep
right.
pounding the point of like, this is worldwide. And as I get back into doing some things worldwide, I'm like, no, I mean, there's so much, but these are the same things people are saying in other places too. So it's a perception that is quite faulty.
But
Yeah.
Let me just add to that before you get to the next question, just since I know you're not gonna be here this afternoon. So one of the things that we talk about is this rights-based approach. And in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 8 is about awareness raising. And that's such a critical component that countries have a responsibility to raise awareness, not to make this, scary and different and so forth. That the way you said it, this was so helpful. It's exciting. You can be multiple things at the same time and so forth. So raising awareness about these differences is absolutely critical.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
That's a different question. How do you, I'm just curious, speaking from our child's experience, she would say, I'm past yet. Like, how do you deal with there's confidence questions, but sometimes the response to that is to be overconfident, say, I'm there,
yeah.
I know, I got it. Don't worry. So how do you,
Yeah.
in your approach and program, how do you help, mitigate the child?
It's good enough. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's being open. It's a practice, it's a process, it's something that needs to be kind of permeated in like a culture. So it isn't just one conversation, but I mean, in my classroom, it's just sort of a constant approach, and part of my language. And I'll say to kids, because I work with a lot of 8th graders and we're getting ready to help them mainstream into regular schools. We are very intentionally only to 8th grade because the idea is we're getting you ready for public or private or whatever, but a kind of regular school that might not get you. And that self-advocacy is a big thing we are promoting. But one of the things I try to say is, look, I'm your bridge. Okay. And like, I am just trying to help you, and we have to stay open to suggestions and also different ways of doing things. So although that grade you got or whatever is good enough, or you think you're already there, you're never really already there. And I try to give examples too with just myself. Like, I mean, you're only kind of an expert for a second maybe because something's always changing, right? So I feel like just examples and being hopefully kind of a humble adult presence like that, kids can kind of absorb that.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but where, and maybe we've got other people in the room that can answer this. Where are we in terms of education of teachers coming in through the education departments at universities, trying to get out of the box, because you can't teach everything, right? And so much of dealing with kids with any type of differences, it's outside the box. And obviously you can't train every teacher to find that and how to work with that.
Right.
But is there a lot more going into education in general? As teachers are coming up through programs to help identify the out of the boxes and how to deal with those strategies. Something I dealt with kind of with my child, just slightly out of the box. And
Right.
some teachers really got it and some teachers just really didn't. And how do you get them, teachers in general, to be able to say, you know, you're just outside of the box a little bit, but
For some of us have never been in a box.
right.
So I've always been sort of floating around.
And I understand, like,
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
in a college setting, you can't teach every teacher to be able to learn all the things about all the
I
stuff
hear you, but
outside the
I think,
box.
again, I still would argue though that like if we took this approach of not sort of seeing like a normal and then there's
Yeah.
deviation, and that needs to be part of the culture of education programs.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is enough. I think it is changing, but it's still, I don't want to sound negative, but I'm shocked at how many education programs have not adopted fully science of reading. I mean, science of reading is for all. It's imperative if you have a learning difference, like dyslexia or ADHD, because it breaks things down systematically and it builds. It's also flexible if you structured literacy is flexible. It's not rigid. So science of reading is that so, no, it is flexible, but it's incremental and it makes language, reading and writing transparent. And that's very important. So it's not just this overwhelming lump. I can't get over how often I hear people treat this as this is just for dyslexic learners. We wouldn't want to do this in our classroom because, then what about all the other kids? No, this is the science of reading. It's good for all. What you do with the students who have dyslexia, ADHD, or whoever are struggling with the reading and writing, is that you are sometimes focusing more intensely. It's a speed and a focus issue. You teach the same thing. You're just doing it a little bit nuanced, and maybe that's where the special ed teacher can come in. But I can't get over how many programs are not doing the science of reading. They're doing balanced literacy, and then that's all over the place for kids.
And just to add to that, so we talk a lot about universal design for learning, which is exactly that strategy. You teach multiple ways to reach multiple people who need to learn differently and so forth. But one of the challenges, Jody, is that most college and university faculty are never taught how to teach.
Good point.
You get a PhD, you get hired to teach in a university program, you almost never get any teaching training.
Right.
And so, those faculty who want to seek out additional teaching training, there are opportunities for it, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I would just say too, I think there's a lot of assumptions that this is a really rare thing. So why would we want to just, we're going to single out, those 2 kids or something? It's really not rare. Start peeling back the layers of your life. You will realize, actually, I'm good that way, or, my spouse, or this kid seems, and you just realize that actually, these are handy labels and they're helpful. On the other hand, there's also a range and there's different intensities. And if you're teaching with this inclusive, more dynamic and creative model, honestly, you're going to reach most everybody. And if you're not then yes, there's maybe those outliers, but yeah. But the science of reading is a perfect example. It's amazing how many people don't get it. And that's that'll be part of the spirit of Dr. Nadine Gabb's talk at Odyssey. So I know it's a bit of a haul, but I really hope you'll take advantage of that. She is amazing. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.